Hello, welcome back to another episode and another week of Redefining Moments. I'm your host Kelly, and I am here to talk to you today about happiness in the mundane. Now, last time I was recording, I think I was coming out of a lower slump, and I was starting to realize the need for consistency within my life. And then something shifted in me. I hit this low point where I just felt probably the worst I've felt in a while, just feeling really rubbish about myself and not like my life didn't really give me any joy, you know. And every time I would go somewhere, it would be like, ugh, I can't be bothered with this, or I don't want to, or I'm not feeling this. And it tainted my whole life. It tainted everything I was doing. And it was just this mindset of, I don't want to be where I am right now. But in truth, I didn't really know where I wanted to be. I just knew I didn't want to be in my life in that moment in time. And not in a morbid way, but in a sense of like, I would rather be elsewhere. And I've noticed that for the last couple of months. Like, I've had quite a few holidays this year. I'm very fortunate in that sense. But it really highlighted the extremes of my life in the sense of like, I would have those big escapes and I would feel so much more me, so much more grounded, so much more presence. And then I would come back to my life and I would be like, great. I would kind of start to spiral into this sense of like not really knowing who I am again, not really knowing what I wanted in life. And I would say this is quite a common theme in my life. Like, I'm constantly searching for who I am. And I feel like as I've got closer to my 30s and into my 30s, I've definitely had this deeper sense of knowing myself and knowing who I am. But I hadn't had it for quite a while. And then something happened at the beginning of this year where I was just like, I don't feel like me. And I don't know what is me anymore. I couldn't see myself in a lot of my communities, hobbies and interests. And as I said, I felt like I hit a wall. And then something shifted that week, which I would have mentioned in my last episode, where I spoke to a friend and they highlighted some things to me about how one of my spirals was over something as simple as a piece of paper being put in a tray. And when you think about it like that, it sounds so ridiculous. Someone put a piece of paper in a tray and my stress levels went up. And then compared it to another scenario of me being at the opticians, for example. And if someone put a piece of paper in a tray at the opticians, would you still feel the same way? And I was like, well, no, of course not. Yet in certain scenarios, we will all have specific labels or identities we fix to certain situations. So something might mean absolutely nothing somewhere else, but it might mean everything in another situation. And it was the thing that was like the straw that was breaking the camel's back. And at the core of it was an identity that I've been holding on to for many years, and it was my trauma. So when I started to unpack it and I looked at myself from a different perspective, from a different scenario, I was able to compare the two parts of myself. So in this case, it was the version of me that worked as an agency worker and the version of me who worked as a permanent member of staff. And the difference was signing that contract. The difference was being committed to something. And I believe I mentioned it in the last episodes. So I started to compare and contrast and look at the two versions of myself and go, okay, what's different? What is my attitude towards life when I'm this person? And what's my attitude towards life when I'm the other person? And I noticed like the pressure of permanence, the pressure of something being forever, quote unquote, created this sense of pressure, which then also made me want to withdraw. It made me be like, I can't be bothered. And it wasn't just in work, it's in relationships, and it's in so many different areas of my life that I could see this shift from impermanence to permanence, this shift from this thing isn't as meaningful or it doesn't matter as much to suddenly it needing meaning, And then I change. I become this version of me which feels more uptight, more intense, more extreme, and it's exhausting. It's absolutely tiring. Another thing I also observed was my consistency, my ability to be consistent towards myself, because often what happens when things get serious, when things get important, I drop the habits and behaviors that allow me to sustain a resourceful and positive mindset. And I think we're all so guilty of this. It's because you're tired, you'd rather vegetate in front of the TV. And I've done that today. I will admit, I've spent a lot of my day watching TV. I woke up with a crick neck. I felt not as good. And I just took that as a sign of, okay, my body is not as strong as it could be. I still tried to do some yoga to help it, which is me being consistent with myself. But then I also recognized the limitations that my body was able to offer me. And I decided to have a day of rest in front of the TV. But then once that had happened, I've also done the other things that I needed to do. But the version of me before would allow myself to get swept away in the things like TV and just stay within that. And it would be a way of avoiding the things I needed to do. Or sometimes I'd be so distracted by, for example, a relationship that I would be like, oh, it's fine, we'll stay in bed and cuddle, and I'll completely ignore my morning yoga. Or I'll be like, I'll do it later, and I never do it later. So it was allowing me to recognize the parts of myself that I self-sacrifice, that I abandon instantly. So because of that, I've had this real insight recently of my commitment to my joy and myself. And it's been really powerful. And it's allowed me to find happiness within the mundane. So I was explaining a second ago about how I was only really finding joy by escaping my life. And something shifted recently where I found joy within my life, within the mundane, within the everyday, within the drive to work, the commute, the noticing the environment, my connection with people. It's being present within my life and not actually needing or wanting to be anywhere else. And I found it quite interesting because I have had another trip this month. I went to Barcelona the other week with my friend. And there was this really incredible observation that I had of when I'm in this place, when I'm grounded, when I'm secure, when I'm nurturing my needs, it doesn't matter whether I'm in England or whether I'm in Barcelona or whether I'm somewhere else. I'm still me at my core. And it doesn't feel like I'm escaping. It just feels like I'm shifting through life. 1 minute I'm here, next minute I'm there, but I'm still me. I'm still grounded. I'm still feeling the best version of me I could possibly feel. And I did say to my friend before I went to Barcelona with her, I was like, I really want to maintain my yoga every morning and do my art every day. My art did slip. I will admit I didn't do my art every single day because it does take time sometimes. And we were so busy exploring the cities from literally the moment we got up to the moment we went to bed. But what I did do was my yoga every day. And I remember actually leaving the trip and being so proud of myself for actually sticking to it, because I know the past version of me would abandon it. And it is a simple task every day. And I've noticed the reason I abandon it quite often is because it becomes a task rather than a way of life. At the moment, my yoga is a way of life. It's a way of sustaining my resourceful, my mindful, my most compassionate version of myself. If I don't do yoga, that is me opening the doors to more negativity, more stiffness, more, just a version of myself I don't really enjoy. And the beautiful thing about some of the yoga I do, some of the classes I do on YouTube in the morning, is literally 10 minutes to 15 minutes to 20 minutes, depending on how much time I have in the day. And the ones I seem to enjoy and the ones I seem to follow also have an intention. They're like, right, when you're on the mat, set an intention. So when I'm on the mat, I'm also setting an intention for my day. I'm sitting there and going, right, today, this is who I'm going to be. This is how I'm going to approach life. And this last week has been more insightful than the weeks before, because the weeks before I've been feeling my best version of myself. I've been feeling amazing, grounded. I didn't need to change anything in my life. I was just so overjoyed with what I had in my life in the moment. I was working towards my goals. I was working towards the things I really enjoyed. But the thing I noticed this last week is when my hours increased rapidly, and I had less time for myself, or less sleep as well. Sleep is such a big factor. When I had less sleep, I was struggling to find more joy in the day. I felt like I was surviving. My body was so tired and exhausted that I was just like, I don't know what to do. And because of that, I found a lot of my raw emotions would come to the surface. So the feelings that I haven't quite processed over the years, the hurt, the heartbreak, the pain, or just the small things would rise up, and my brain would just be processing it over and over again, looping. I would try and put it down, put it to one side, and then it will come back again when I least expect it, looping. And there were some moments where I went on AI, I sat with it, I tried to process it. And then there were points where I was like, hold on a second, this is enough. I'm overthinking. I'm allowing myself to fall into this spiral and I'm not actually living. So how can I be more present? And I found the conversations, slight distractions, allowed me to like click and be back in the present. I was there. I was back. And then my joy started to come back again. I was like, great, this is me. This is the version of me I love. This is the version of me I adore. And I found the same happen again today. I've been on my day off. I've been at home. My neck's been hurting. I've been watching TV. And there were points I started to feel really crap within myself, really like, ugh, I don't like myself today. I don't feel good within myself today. I realized a lot of the time it is because I either feel fatigued, tired, or hungry. And actually, when I listened to my body and I actually ate something, my joy came back. And then when I started to take action towards the things that had been building up, like changing my bedding and hoovering my floor, the simple things, I found my joy and I found my happiness again, because I was actually doing the things I wanted to do, but also the things that make me feel good about myself, make me feel good in my space. My environment feels clean. My mind feels clean. And as a result, I found that joy again. So it's finding the joy in these moments, finding the joy in our simple moments of life, whether it's looking after our teeth, putting moisturizer on to look after our body, washing our hair. Like, there are so many different ways we can find joy through the little luxuries of what we do for ourselves to make ourselves feel good and to sustain our bodies and our minds. And for me, I think that's been the most powerful thing. It's been the real shift in myself this last month, is remembering what it means to love myself and to find joy within life. And I think as well, like, what I realize is there is a slight difference between happiness and joy. And I read the Book of Joy a couple of years back, and it does kind of explain a lot of this. But to me, I've noticed a few things about emotions. So I've noticed that we lost someone close to us recently who I grew up with. And I noticed that I tend to feel sadness towards loss, and I haven't lost anyone or anything particularly close to me, like as in like directly big and substantial. But I've still lost people who I still care about. And I've noticed there's a difference between grief and sadness. So often I feel sadness, but I don't grieve. I tend to feel the pain and this upset, but I don't hold on to it as a part of my identity, which I feel is often grief, because we're more in denial about what's happened. We don't want to accept what's happened. Whereas with sadness, I'm like, okay, I'm sad. This is upset. I don't like the fact that that person's not going to be in my life anymore, but I'm also not holding on to it. I'm not holding on to that wound. And it's the same when it comes to like happiness and joy, because I was able to find joy in a moment where it was sad, in a moment where we were grieving that person, where we were saying our goodbyes, and that is sad. That is sad, but I would still be able to find joy in that, because for me, there's joy in life. There's joy in knowing somebody. There's joy in those experiences. And I think that's the key thing, is like learning to find joy regardless of what's happening in life, regardless of what's happening around you. And that's been a big shift in myself as well the last couple of weeks, is the profound realization that life isn't happening to me, it's just happening. And it's hard to explain, because it's not something that, like, I know life isn't happening to me, but it's a feeling. Like recently I've had this shift where I'm like my friend's passport got stolen in Barcelona, and rather than that making our holiday worse, it literally happened on our first day, it made it better. It made our experience better, because we literally went, okay, this is really crap, but what can we do about it? What's done is done. We can't change it. Let's embrace what's happened. Do the next most powerful thing we can do, which is go and report it to the police station. And we'll deal with it step by step. And both me and my friend are very fortunate in the sense of we're both people who have experience traveling by ourselves. So like any of the situations we were put into as a result of it wasn't really impactful in a sense, but we just dealt with it. And then because of that, we were coming back from the police station, and we're walking along this route that I'd looked up before my phone had died. And in this park, in a random place of Barcelona, were a group of salsa dancers, and I ended up going and joining them and having some really incredible salsa dances with complete strangers. And if it wasn't for my friend's passport getting stolen, as horrible as that was for her, it's not nice, it's not a great situation. At the same time, it also allowed us to go to a different part of Barcelona, and I'm not gonna lie, my silver lining in that moment was getting some salsa dances in and experiencing a side of myself which I love in Barcelona. And I think that's the thing, it's things can happen to us, but it doesn't have to feel like the world is coming down on us. It doesn't have to feel like suffering. And if there are things like that, which I know recently, like my moods still have been up and down, like I know there are moments where I'm like, I cannot see joy here, I cannot see happiness here, but I'm also questioning, why am I even feeling this way? Even though I have all the answers, I know on paper why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. But sometimes we just don't want to be feeling that way. We don't want to accept that we're feeling that way. Why can't I be feeling how I was feeling last week? Why do I have to be feeling like this? Even though I'm exhausted, my hormones are shifting, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm this, I'm that. You know, I've been non-stop. There are so many factors that can impact us. I didn't sleep well last night. You know, there are so many different things that could be impacting our emotional resilience to the day. And life does feel heavy. Sometimes it feels like I don't want to be feeling this way. But actually, when we just accept, well, I'm feeling this way, this is what it is. Like, it's not personal. It's just, this is the emotions that I'm carrying right now. And it will pass. It won't last long. And it's the same with those moments. We can either dwell on them. We can either cry, and we can cry in those moments. Like, don't get me wrong, allow it. Let yourself feel the feelings, your feelings. But also, what is the worth of holding on to that? if last week my friend and I held on to the fact that her purse and passport got stolen, we would not have enjoyed our trip. We would not have had as good of a trip as we would have. It probably would have ruined it. Instead, I think we can both agree that that was actually, I know for me, it was one of the best trips I've had in a while, because I think it just tapped into so many different versions of myself. And because I felt so present and so me, and so just a part of myself in a different city, I was still me at my core. So it was a really nice sensation to have, and to also recognize that the world doesn't have to cave under you when something happens. It's just coming from that strong place and responding to it. So I'm really grateful for these experiences the last couple of weeks, because it's really given me an insight into a lot of who I am and who I can be. And I feel I've got a clearer representation of those two worlds. So now I try my best not to let life get overwhelming, or for those thoughts to take over. It's just recognizing them and just living, just enjoying life and seeing where it can take me and others. Because when I come from this space as well, I feel I'm able to give so much more love to this world, so much more kindness, so much more happiness. Like, even talking about all this to you guys right now, I'm noticing a shift in my body. I'm noticing like the joy that runs through me from just sharing my perspective of the world with you. And I think the hope that it could inspire people to just look at life a little differently, and hopefully bring them more joy. So yeah, if you've enjoyed this episode, it's been a bit of a random one, but it's just more of an update of how we can potentially live life within the mundane, and how I personally, I think that's what I said, how I'm personally finding more joy within my life. It's honestly, the world can either be doom and gloom, and there is so much to find doom and gloom about, or it can be full of love, full of joy, and full of laughter. And I think we all know what we would choose every single time. So it's just the choice of choosing it, and also finding it, making room for it. What can you do in your routine, in your life, to make room for more joy? To carve out a space that welcomes in that love, welcomes in that joy, welcomes in laughter. For me, doing my yoga every morning, doing a bit of art every day, connecting with others, recording, these small things are what allow me to make room for my joy. And then other things slot in as well. But as long as I've got those foundations, life feels pretty sweet and it feels pretty good. And I've noticed when I haven't been feeling that good, I have abandoned most of my foundations. So how can you make these foundations as strong as you possibly can to go out and live a joyful life, to go out and find joy in the everyday? Let me know in the comments, and let me know how you get on with this yourselves, because this is what I'm going to be doing for the foreseeable future, is just recording my progress towards sustaining a life of joy, making room and creating a life where joy is at the heart of it. Because that is where we shine, that is where we find so much happiness. And yeah, I look forward to seeing your journey, and I look forward to sharing my journey, because it is going to be a work in progress. And I'm not going to lie, I've failed a lot the last couple of weeks, and I'm probably going to fail a lot in the future. But I think it's a challenge that's worth failing at. Just trying to be joyful all the time from an authentic place and not from a false place. So on that note, I wish you a joyful week, a joyful day, and I hope you're able to find the foundations that make room for that happiness within your life, to make room for more positivity. Until next time.